fine.
Not until I sit down. I better go get my coffee now.
Good evening. It is 2 minutes after 7. We are in Council Chambers. It is Wednesday, November the 25th, 2015. This is a special Council Public Planning meeting. Welcome you all here tonight. Councillors, first of all, declarations of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof, please. Seeing none, Madam Clerk, may I please have a motion excuse me, to approve the agenda as has been circulated. Thank you, Councillor Tom. Councillor Perry? Comments or questions on the agenda? All in favor then? Contrary? That is carried. We have a couple of planning applications. The first thing, we have a statement that we read with respect to the public planning application process. Welcome to Aurora's. Pardon me? Okay, hold on, please. Linda, could you turn that up, please? Thank you. Is that better? Thank you. Welcome to Aurora's public planning meeting. The purpose of this public meeting is to inform the public and obtain input regarding proposed official plan amendment and proposed zoning bylaw amendments. No decisions on the applications will be made tonight. For each planning application that will be considered by Council tonight, the following process will occur. The town planning staff will outline the purpose of the planning application which is being considered. The applicant will then be given an opportunity to make a presentation and address any issues which have already been raised in the staff report or public concerns which have already been filed. Following the presentations, members of the public will be invited to offer their comments or concerns with respect to that specific application, and then either the town staff or the applicant will attempt to answer those questions. Once we've heard from the members of the public on a specific application, and we've got a couple, so we do this process a few times, I will then ask members of Council if they have any comments or questions for the applicant. It should be noted that a comprehensive review will be prepared and presented to a future General Committee meeting assessing the merits of the application before us and providing Council with a recommendation for consideration. It's very important that the town receive the correct names and addresses of individuals having an interest in the planning application. Therefore, if you plan to speak to Council this evening, or if you wish to be notified of future Council or committee meetings concerning the applications being presented, you must complete one of the green interested party forms that our secretary is holding up, Linda, and give it to Linda before you leave tonight. Under the Planning Act, the applicant or residents have the right to appeal any decision of Council on a planning application to the Ontario Municipal Board. But you must verbally express any comments or concerns here tonight or submit any comments or concerns in writing prior to Council adopting an amendment. The Ontario Municipal Board may dismiss all or part of an appeal made in respect of an application. This public meeting is being audio and video recorded. Your name, address, comments, and any other personal information are being recorded according to the Municipal Act and the Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. This will help our clerk prepare accurate minutes and to create a record that is available to the general public, including the town's website. Questions about this collection should be directed to the town clerk, Town of Aurora. I will now ask the Deputy Clerk to confirm that notification to the public has occurred as required by the Planning Act. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In regards to item 1, the applications for official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment regarding Carpino Construction, Inc., 15278 Yonge Street, file numbers OPA-2015-04, ZBA-2015-10, and related file number SP-2015-08, Notice of public planning meeting was published in the Aurora and Aurora Banner newspapers on November 5th, 2015, and was also given by mail to all addressed property owners within a minimum of 120 meters of the subject lands. Notice of the public planning meeting was posted on the subject lands by signage fronting Yonge Street and Matchell Avenue. Public planning notification has been provided in accordance with the Planning Act. In regards to item 2, the application for zoning bylaw amendment regarding Small Steps Programs, Inc., 138 Center Street, part of Lot 2, Registered Plan 107, file number ZBA 2015-11, and related file number SP-2015-09. On November 5, 2015, a notice of public planning was published in the Aurora and Aurora Banner newspapers and given by mail to all addressed property owners within a minimum of 120 meters of the subject lands. Notice of the public planning meeting signs were also posted on the subject lands fronting Center Street. Public meeting notification has been provided in accordance with the Planning Act.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I will now go to our Director of Planning and Development Services to start the presentations. Mr. Ramuna, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll call up our planner, Drew McMartin, to provide an overview of the first item, and I see the applicant is here, and their planner, Ms. McIntyre, will also provide a presentation on their proposal. Drew?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. The applications before us tonight is an official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment. The applicant is Carpino Construction Incorporated, and the file numbers, as previously mentioned, are OPA-2015-04- and ZBA, -2015-10. The proposal is an official plan amendment to address standalone as well as first floor residential land use policies. The zoning amendment to rezone the subject lands from central commercial C2 zone to road dwelling residential R6 exception zone. The site plan proposes 126 stacked back-to-back townhouse condominium dwelling units within 6 separate buildings. Each unit is 2 stories in height, with a 2-story unit then stacked on top of the other. So what you have is a ground floor two-unit building, and then on top of that is an additional 2-unit building. The applicant will get into that in further detail further in the presentation. Here we see the subject lands outlined in red. You have a major intersection there of Yonge Street and Wellington Street. It's located northwest of those arterials. The official plan, the subject lands are designated as the Aurora Promenade by the official plan, and more specifically as Upper Downtown within the Aurora Promenade secondary plan area. The proposed stacked back-to-back residential development requires an official plan amendment to address standalone as well as first floor residential land use policies on the subject lands. Here we see an example of Schedule A of the official plan, which outlines that the area is located within the Upper Downtown. The zoning bylaw amendment, as previously mentioned, is also required. The subject lands are currently zoned Central Commercial C2 zone by the Town of Aurora zoning bylaw. The C2 zone only permits dwelling units above the first story. An amendment to the zoning bylaw is required to rezone the subject lands to allow for stacked back-to-back dwelling units as a permitted use, and site-specific exceptions to accommodate the proposed 126-unit development. The applicant is proposing to rezone the subject lands from Central Commercial C2 zone to road dwelling residential R6 exception zone. Here we see just an example of the proposed R6 exception zone in relation to the surrounding area. As previously mentioned, there's also a site plan proposed for 126 units. The proposed buildings will be 4-story in height with rooftop terraces on the 4th story. Residential parking will be located partially below ground beneath the units, and visitor parking will be outdoors at ground level throughout the subject lands. Circulation through the proposed redevelopment will be from a 6.0 meter wide private condominium road with access from Matchell Avenue. No direct access from Yonge Street is currently proposed. There is currently an access from Yonge Street, which has been bordered off as a result of the development. The current driveway access to Yonge Street will be closed. Here we see a site plan of the proposal. The fire route indicates the private condominium road. Blocks 5 there on the eastern side will be used in a elevation coming up momentarily. Here we see a view of Block 5, which shows a conceptual building elevation as to what is being proposed. And here we see a rendering, just a color rendering essentially of that same elevation. Some preliminary public comments were received, concerns regarding no commercial uses proposed, traffic concerns as a result of the proposed development and its impact on Matchell Avenue and Irwin Avenue, which may hinder the ability to turn onto Yonge Street and Wellington Street as a result of the proposed development. In addition, we also heard comments regarding street width on Matchell Avenue is too narrow, and the proposed development will restrict the ability for existing residents located on Matchell Avenue to use the subject lands to park personal vehicles. In addition, a commercial assessment and a Phase 2 environmental site assessment is required. These are staff comments, not public comments now. Additionally, underground access to Block 1 from Matchell Avenue is to be evaluated further, as well as submissions of an archaeological assessment, noise assessment, and vibration impact assessment study and construction impact mitigation study will be required at the site plan approval stage. Currently, we're discussing the OP and zoning bylaw, but these will be required in the future. In conclusion, staff will undertake a technical review of the subject application addressing the outlined matters, as well as the comments received from the public and council raised at the public meeting here tonight. A comprehensive report with recommendations and options will be presented for consideration and direction at a future general committee meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Drew. Ms. McIntyre.
Hi, everyone. My name is Joan McIntyre. I'm a principal at Malone Given Parsons, and our firm has been doing planning in Aurora for decades now, starting with, I think, Magna many years ago. I'm introducing Treasure Hill, who is actually the owner of the site, also known as Carpino. And they're a well-known builder. They've recently won awards for medium-density housing developments in Toronto and in Richmond Hill. That's what that slide is. They're currently working in Aurora. They have a number of sites, including a commercial one on Bayview Avenue, where a lot of your commercial big box type stores are located. They're also working on Wellington Street. They have 2 sites on either side. And they have recently had subdivision approved in the 2C lands. They've also recently completed Aurora Woods down on Bayview Avenue, and I think their products have met the requirements of the town or exceeded them. The site that we're talking about is at the corner of Yonge and Wellington and is being named Time. Drew showed us the elevation earlier, and we've applied to the Region of York to be exempted from their review of the official plan amendment, and they've provided us with a letter exempting us from their review, stating that our application is very minor in nature and is in accordance with the corridors and the principles and objectives of the region's official plan for the Yonge Street area. Previous uses of the site, I think the building was originally constructed in the late 60s and was used as a suburban shopping center. It was owned by IGA. It's been a price chopper. It's been a liquidation world, and Treasure Hill bought it in 2014, and it was, I believe, vacated by Liquidation World shortly after when their lease expired. The surrounding uses of the site are predominantly residential, with the exception of the frontage along Wellington and Yonge. There's a very large community park located to the west, isolating this residential area from the remainder of the subdivisions. And there's commercial across the street, including the Centro building that's under construction, which has both uses on it. And there's also ground-related residential fronting right onto Yonge Street, just north of that. We've had a draft commercial study prepared by Urban Metrics, and they've concluded that this is an appropriate use for the site to remove the ground floor residential. Because of the history of commercial failure on this site, it's at a fringe location in downtown. The Yonge Street drops off, and the uses change to mostly open space and residential north of this area, so it's a kind of a shoulder area. There's a small population. The type of retail that's located on Yonge Street is predominantly catering to the local area residents. People driving for needs such as weekly grocery definitely don't plan on shopping on Yonge Street. Inflow is required for viable commercial uses in this area, so more residential is needed, in fact, to support the the commercial that's there now. The commercial vacancy rates were high by their estimation. A successful commercial area has between 5 to 7% vacancy, and the vacancy rates here are 12%. The site plan shows that most of the Yonge Street frontage, I think over 80%, has building on it, which will achieve a lot of the objectives of your promenade plan for built form and attractive architecture along Yonge Street. The site's about 1 hectare in size, and as I said, the underground parking will be hidden from Yonge Street and mostly from the residents behind. The designs are modern with bowing to historical the appearance, I guess. The facades are all going to be high quality architecture, equally treated on all sides. These buildings meet the town's massing. We're permitted to do 5 stories, I believe, in this area with, I think, a bonus 6, even on top of commercial. So this is a little bit less than is permitted. This type of building will increase pedestrian connections and activity on Yonge Street. It's much more preferable than parking lots. Porches and entries onto Yonge will be provided. And in the end, it will replace a vacant 1-story suburban building with more urban form. This explains the form of the building. You can see that we've kind of colored it up from a cross-section, showing that the units are joined back to back, one above the other, and all accessible from ground level. The top floor has a bit of a podium on it, housing mechanical equipment, and the tops are enclosing the stairs, and their amenity area is a rooftop patio. The other units will have balconies, some of them on Yonge Street and some into the private areas. The site has unbelievable transit. There's no shortage of buses right in front of the site. There's a bus stop there and a ticket booth. Could walk to the GO station. There's transit on Wellington as well. We've provided 148 spaces on site, 1 for each residential unit, and then visitor parking at grade. And as Drew noted, the Yonge Street access will be closed, which is desirable for the region. So in short, an OPA is required only for the ground floor residential. The built form is consistent with regional and provincial policies. Ground floor is not desirable or viable on this site. In fact, it will probably cause more problems for the existing vacancies. Development will be an asset to the downtown by providing intensification, which is in line with provincial and regional policies and also the towns. Providing more commercial users, actually it should be more residential users, more residents in the areas to use the commercial, and it will improve the landscape of Yonge Street. In short, I guess, again, sorry for repeating myself, this development is compatible with the surrounding uses. There's already an apartment building on the other side of Matchell, and it represents good planning. And
is that it?
that's it.
Thank you, Ms. McIntyre. And we'll now open it up to members of the public. And so anybody who would like to speak with respect to this particular application, please come down to the podium. We'd like you to give your name, your address, and you have 5 minutes. And we do have a clock. Linda, excuse me, could you point out the clock? So there's a clock right there.
Hi, Mr. Mayor, member of council and planning staff. I'm Gail McIntyre. There's a fairly well-known expression that exists in our language for hundreds of years because it is true. We are nothing if we do not know our history, and in this case I'm talking about our extant natural history. This development will impede drainage of our aquifer into the creek, a creek already compromised by upstream development. This was called Red Willow Creek in pioneer days, but more recently it's known as Tannery Creek. And it is now but a trickle of what it was in the past. It once had fish, chub, in the creek. This development will not help any to the creek's viability. With more stormwater runoff to the creek as the building and parking lot takes a foothold with more stormwater into the overburdened creek. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McIntyre.
My name's Glenn. I live on Machel. Just a couple things here. I'll be brief. One of my major concerns is, again, there's only one exit, and in case of an emergency, how do you get in and out with emergency vehicles? Like, anybody who lives on Machel understands in the morning to try and leave, you can't get onto Yonge Street. It's very difficult, and Wellington is also very difficult. Monders is there, all their commercial vehicles are there every morning, and trying to drive around them it's virtually impossible because you still have people turning onto Machel. It really is a nightmare right now, and that's without anybody else there. The lack of street parking also, there are members here that don't have driveways, that live right across the street. So if their vehicles are on the road and I'm trying to drive north and they're trying to drive south and you have 128 vehicles at the best trying to leave at the same time to go to work, it's a disaster. And how do you feasibly put a stoplight at Wellington and Yonge Street as well when it's 200 feet from Yonge Street? I also noticed there's only 11 additional parking spaces from the drawing that I could see on the outside of the building for visitors, I'm assuming. That doesn't leave many spaces for 11 for 126 units is not a lot. So they're going to be trying to find parking on the street as well. So you can only park on one side of the road on Machel and Irwin as well. It's very, very difficult. Another concern personally to me is I live at the end of Machel, right by the Hillary House, and it's a constant flow already of traffic turning around, doing U-turns in our driveways. And you get because the Fleury Park is there as well, you get the tennis players, you get the soccer teams. People are wondering where Machel Park is, noticing that it's not on Machel, it's somewhere different. So you get 2 and 3 cars coming down at the same time trying to look for ways out of this place. And it just doesn't work. It's very busy. So anyway, that's my speech. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening. My name is John Bridgman. I live on Irwin. So we've addressed the environmental effects of this and the parking and the roads. My concern is Yonge Street. Right now we have a commercial area that a lot of people enjoy. For some reason we plan on changing that. Joan McIntyre said that this is a good planning. Well, why do we have a planning department and why wasn't this done? This is not good planning. You drive up Yonge Street, it's going to look like a tunnel. It's going to be shadowed. It's not good planning, it's poor planning. A solution maybe would be the commercial keep it and do luxury townhomes. Half as many people, they're going to bring in twice as much money as far as taxes, as far as the cost of the homes. Fewer people, less traffic, a much better idea. There has to be something there, and I believe that townhomes are the answer, but not this kind of townhome. If you drive down Bayview, you can see one of their other developments. It's horrible. Just do it. We don't want that in Aurora, not on Yonge Street. Do something else. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Hi, my name is Mike Ewitz. I live at 22 Matchell. I have a PowerPoint. Okay, great. Anyway, so first off, I'd like to thank the council for hearing us, and especially to the town staff for explaining the process and making it a little bit clearer. You've already seen this. The site looks a little bit different now that the building's gone and the pavement's gone and there's a big pile of mud and fences everywhere. I'm not a town planner. I don't pretend to be one. And so I apologize for any misconceptions I might have or for making some assumptions that might not be valid, but please correct me where I'm wrong. I'm assuming that the Aurora Promenade is essentially this site, represents this site. I went to the official plan from 2010 and did some quick scanning and kind of highlighted what the vision of the promenade plan is. And I mean, I'll be blunt, I don't think that this really represents what the full potential of the site could be. So the vision of the intention of the official plan is to promote some of these, you know, responsible growth management, ensuring design excellence, building a greener community, providing, you know, you can read it for yourself. I don't want to waste a lot of time reading off something that you're probably more familiar with than I am. So in terms of the official plan, town plan, and the element opportunities that are being missed here, this is not an extensive list or a thorough list, but you know, the pedestrian experience is definitely not being enhanced here. There's no street interest created on Yonge Street. There's no through traffic available anymore. This used to be a thoroughfare for people coming from Yonge Street, entering onto Matchell and going to the park, walking their dogs, that kind of stuff. So this essentially is not going to be happening here. You know, the plan is, this plan essentially effectively blocks off this entire corner in the heart of Aurora and then creates an isolated high-density island with only one way in and one way out. I had a description for it, but my wife advised me to not use that here. It might be offensive. The opportunity to promote the mixed use is absent, which is an important part of the official plan. You know, according to the plan, buildings and sites should be accommodated, should accommodate an array of compatible development. Well, this is not an array. There's no greenery in the plan, and what's especially upsetting is there's not even any attention given to the fact that they cut down a perfectly good 150-year-old oak tree to make room for this site. The building height and the form aren't in harmony with the community and the character of the area. The building height for my house is going to be blocking sun illumination for my property and adjacent properties. Parking provisions and traffic flow, I don't think have been really reviewed. Anyway, I'll skip ahead. Specifically, I mean, my major concern is a self-interested one in that I am looking at what the parking situation is going to be. So our understanding, and it was confirmed tonight, that essentially we're looking at 1 to 1.2 parking spots per dwelling. However, the Canadian average for vehicle ownership is about 1.5 cars per household, while in York region that average is about 1.86 cars.
1 minute, sir.
I'm sorry?
1 minute.
It's okay. So I don't think that the parking situation is going to be addressed here. The snow removal is going to be another issue. I really need to talk about the history of the site. The town has raised the road level in this area to accommodate the commercial needs of this property primarily, as well as to accommodate infrastructure. which has made it impossible for these houses to have a parking lot or a driveway because of the road level increase. This is a picture of the front of my house. You can see that the road level is about 42 inches up the side of my house, so the engineering is just not even feasible. This is another driveway where the slope is too severe, so it can't accommodate any kind of winter accommodation.
Okay. I'm going to ask you to wrap. You can come back, okay?
Okay.
But I'm going to ask you to wrap
I'll
up.
pick it up from here.
Yep.
My name is Marty Reddick, and I'm here representing the interests of our family. We currently own 3 properties on Yonge Street, 2 of which are adjacent to the proposed development by Carpino. I'm not in agreement with the proposed site plan to the extent that it allows future occupants of Carpino's development to access our properties or otherwise encourages trespassing across our properties. If you look at the site plan, what you will see is that it shows a retaining wall along Carpino's property, immediately adjacent to one of our properties, which is 15296 Yonge Street. And the retaining wall has a gap in it just west of the property that has the effect of opening access for Carpino property to my property. I'm concerned that this opening will lead to residents of Carpino's future development to believe that they have some sort of access to Yonge Street from Carpino's property to my property, and then along my property down to Yonge Street. I have several concerns about having residents walk across our property, in particular given the density of the residents that Carpino is requesting approval for. We are very concerned about public safety. We cannot have pedestrians trespassing or wandering over property in an effort to shortcut across to Yonge Street. We have a collision repair center and a glass repair center, which are currently operating on those properties. You know, we are concerned about the liability of somebody getting hurt if they were to actually access our property. So in summary, we're not in agreement with the proposed site plan as an opening between the 2 retaining walls south and west of our fenced properties, which would suggest to residents of Carpino's development that they could have access to our property to cut through to Yonge Street. We require an explanation as to why there is an opening between the 2 retaining walls on Carpino's development, and confirmation that strangers will not be trespassing or wandering on our property. As I said previously, it is a liability. We are currently obligated and under, I guess, contract with several business partners that we have to have secure compounds, and you know, that certainly would be an issue for us with people wandering onto our property. And we would like the proposed site plan to be amended to close the gap between the 2 retaining walls on Carpino's property, to make it clear that no access will be given to anyone over our property, and that the right of way, that the right area will not be used basically to go onto our property. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening. My name's Fiona Gagne, and I live on Irwin Avenue. And my concerns have already been stated, but I think that it's important that I come up and talk about it as well. And I'm very concerned about the density of the units that are proposed. Because of the traffic congestion that's already been stated, and also because of the safety, the potential safety issues. We are an established neighborhood. We have children. The children walk down the road to the park to play. Of course, these buildings, if they go ahead in any shape or form, will bring many more children into the neighborhood, and that's a positive thing. However, if there are many, many additional cars, driving through two very narrow streets, Irwin and Machel, onto two extremely busy streets, Yonge and Wellington, that seems to be a very hazardous situation, at least in my mind. Also, as one of the gentlemen that spoke earlier mentioned, in the summer, Fleury Park is extremely busy, which again is fabulous. Tennis courts, soccer playing, baseball. Many, many kids being dropped off by their parents and walking into the park. That creates congestion already. So that's one of my main concerns, the safety of everybody, but especially our children and the children that may come in the future. My other concern is, of course, the additional cars that this will bring into our, as I've just said, very narrow streets. It's already been mentioned that several of the houses on Machel don't have driveway parking, so they park on the road. So many times, Machel is effectively a one-lane road. This is very evident to me. I work in Aurora. My journey home used to involve me driving along Wellington, turning north on Yonge, and then sitting at Yonge, waiting to turn onto my street, Irwin Avenue. I've stopped doing that because I'm so concerned that I'm going to get rear-ended. The traffic is so busy. So now I drive along Wellington Street, across the Yonge-Wellington intersection onto Wellington East, and turn onto Machel to then drive along and turn onto my street, Irwin. Many times, as soon as I've turned onto Machel off Wellington, I'm faced with a stream of traffic which presumably has been traveling south on Yonge Street, turned onto Irwin, and then onto Machel, heading to Wellington, trying to avoid the Yonge-Wellington intersection. So once again, I sit there, having just made my turn onto Machel, and wait for 5, 6, often 7, 8 cars to pass me, because only one car can drive in the direction at once. In the winter, it's even more hazardous. We have large piles of snow on either side. Then, of course, you have cars parked, and it's even narrower. So that, I think, sums up my concerns. It's already almost, I want to say, a bottleneck. And now we're going to you're proposing to bring in maybe 148 additional vehicles. I just think that it's overtaxing the infrastructure that we have there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I have lived on Machel Avenue for approximately 40 years. Never in all that time have I heard this ludicrousy.
Excuse me, can I, your name, please?
Margaret Ferry.
Thank you.
35 Machel, Danny and Margaret Ferry. And this lady that just spoke before me is absolute correct. Many, many times I have come down onto Machel towards Wellington Street only to have to back up half the street where LW have just left, and so I could back up into there to let somebody else come up Machel. Otherwise, they would have to back out onto Wellington Street. Many times I've almost got hit. Once I called the bylaws officer. Once I spoke face-to-face with the bylaws officer. When I was telling them about the problem on Machel Avenue, they said, oh, well, we'll go into LW and talk to them. Had nothing to do with LW except for me having to back up into their parking spot. I was complaining about all the cars parked there, which narrowed the road. And it's such an asinine way of, the road needs to be widened if this is going to happen. I was also told that, oh, you should be living in a subdivision when there's a whole bunch of people coming out at the same time. I've been traveling subdivisions. Their roads are wider than Machel Avenue, and I dare anybody to go and measure the roadways to see what happens, because I've been doing this last week knowing that I'm coming here tonight. And everything else that was said prior to me, I wholeheartedly agree with them. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
That was not a long speech, just a very short note on a laptop. Mr. Mayor, councillors, planning committee. My name is Marcel Gagne. I live at 8 Irwin. I'm kind of the ideal citizen, at least for this sort of project. I kind of work downtown. I walk to the GO station in the morning. I don't have to go 650 meters. I have to go about 800 meters, a bit more of a walk. Concern I have has been addressed already, but just want to reiterate it. One of the things I have noticed is traffic densities over the years going up. I used to be able to walk to the GO station and walk back, and I would actually be passed by traffic. I now get in my morning ride, and there are people that I pass at Yonge Street that are driving and can't even find a place to park at the GO station, let alone even get to the GO station on time and miss their trains. So the density has been going up, even to the point where when I'm walking from the GO station, I often am passing traffic, and I get home before cars pass me on the road. So it's actually quite interesting. I also have the unique or dubious honor of being one of the only residents on the street that hasn't been hit coming out of either Machel or Irwin, because those intersections are actually quite busy these days with traffic moving at fairly high speeds. So again, the concern I have is I don't think any problems with the higher density building downtown, obviously with the plans of the city and the town and the region. But again, the density seems to be a bit high for that particular area. And once again, I'm really wondering about whether that's putting too much burden on the downtown core. And once again, I love the downtown. I do, my shopping downtown, go to the library, visit all the local shops, and that's one of the reasons I've been living in Aurora for over 20 years. It's a great community to live in, and I've enjoyed it. I do enjoy the density increases, but again, in this instance, I'm kind of wondering about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Would you like to go first? Good evening, Mayor, councillors, fellow residents and citizens of the town of Aurora. My name is Hugh Walker, and I am an owner of property on Machel Avenue, which is adjacent to the subject lands. I have some points I would like to raise, but first some general comments. I note that the original billboard showed a revitalized retail space. This was changed to an abstract high-rise landscape with the nondescript "Time is coming" slogan. Probably a good idea, as it prevented residents from seeing that the proposed design is for 6 four-story blocks of generic, and if I may say so, somewhat unimaginative design. Certainly not a design in keeping with the town of Aurora's published desire to enhance the areas around Yonge Street and Wellington Street as a designated area of historical importance. My immediate reaction on first seeing the proposed site was of an aerial view of a correctional facility with its tightly packed blocks. I accept that the architects have no doubt met the developer's objective to maximize density while remaining within the constraints imposed by the soil analysis conducted by the engineers. I also accept the developer's desire to maximize their returns. I apologize to both if my observations cause any offense. However, I seriously question whether such a congested design in this core area of Aurora is in keeping with the character of the area and could even meet the goals laid out in the town's strategic plan for 2031, transit support notwithstanding. I believe it is a part of the town's long-range plan to create a people-friendly downtown core to entice both residents and visitors. This I wholeheartedly agree with, as a revitalized downtown area is essential for a successful and vibrant community. The majority of urban design planners would accept that a commercial residential mixed density development would be much better than a residential only development in achieving this objective for a property abutting Aurora's main street, i.e. Yonge Street. The Aurora Promenade CIP itself supports the vision for the development of the area as a highly mixed-use urban environment, along with an example photograph, which is no doubt redundant. Be that as it may, I have some specific concerns with the proposed development. I note that there are 2 driveway entrances exits, both onto Machel Avenue and with none onto Yonge Street. Machel Avenue is not a particularly wide road, properly considered a residential street, although such was not the case during the recent demolition work, and obviously won't be during the construction phase. Machel Avenue is also a thoroughfare for children and families going to and from Fleury Park, and with an additional 126 units will result in a substantial increase in traffic density and resultant safety issues. I believe the proposed plan allocates 1.2 parking spaces per unit, which I've been informed is at the very bottom range as required by the town of Aurora. I note that the plan proposes an additional 17 above-ground parking spaces for, I would assume, visitors. I do not know if these 17 spaces are included in the 1.2 unit specification, though. I note that the driveway is shown as being 6 meters wide and is designated as, and obviously required as, a fire route. Such a road width would of necessity demand absolutely no resident parking on the driveway. Accordingly, during periods of national holidays or common family get-togethers, parking will be at a premium and will be more than likely spill onto the limited space on Matchell Avenue to the detriment of present residents. Certainly, visitors to the 16 units in Block 1 will most likely park on Matchell Avenue no matter what, due to its close proximity. I am glad to note that the site plan drawing specifies that excess snow would be removed off-site through private contract. I trust off-site isn't simply a euphemism for onto Matchell. This is essential as global warming is predicted to produce more and heavier snowfalls. This specification will need to be strictly enforced, as if not, will either dramatically reduce the current visitor parking or result in substantial snow discharge onto Matchell Avenue. That would be a disaster for current residents. Certainly there is no room on Matchell Avenue right now. I note that it is common knowledge that a spring runs behind the houses immediately adjacent to the proposed site on the northeast side.
Sir, one minute.
Thank you. Northeast side of Matchell Avenue. I believe the potentially affected residents have been contacted and existing conditions documented. Well, I hope so for their sakes. The apartment building at the northwest corner of Aurora Heights Boulevard and Yonge Street, and also the Caitlinn development nearing completion directly across the road, both experience serious ground war issues, and that fuels my concern there. Finally, to a specific concern of mine, over the years, the town of Aurora has done several major road upgrades to Matchell Avenue. This has resulted in a substantial raising of the road level, with the effect that mine and the adjacent properties on either side have been denied the ability to easily add parking space. Currently, we have received from the town parking permits that exempt us from the winter restrictions on street parking. I have been informed that these are a temporary measure, while a permanent solution is devised by town council and staff. If the town approves of this proposed development proceeding, I have some suggestions as to a possible resolution that should satisfy all parties and cause only the most minimal of impact.
Hey, Mr. Walker, I need to ask you to wrap up. You can come back.
Okay. Well, my final paragraph or sentence is, I would therefore be most grateful if the mayor or another member of council could recommend to me an individual at the town who would be in a position to guide such a solution through the process. Mayor, council members, residents, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Evening, Mr. Mayor, Councillor. I'll be very brief. My concern, I don't live on Machel. My name is Steve Mills. I live at the corner of Yonge and Maple. I have, my question has to do with the 3 properties to the north of the proposed development. That is the 2 auto properties and the piece of land that has been vacant for some time and is host to a large number of useless kinds of trees. It may be a part of a solution to lightening the density. I don't know, but my question is, has there been any approach to the possibility of including them in this development in order to clean up Yonge Street between Irwin and Wellington? That would be it. Thank you.
Mr. Mills, I'm sorry, just for clarification. So the 3 properties north, which would be Hillary House, the Redmond House, and Horton House?
No, the 3 properties are...
Oh, between Irwin and the proposed development?
Correct.
Thank you, sir.
My question is, has there been any discussion between those properties?
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. My name is Kevin Walker. I do not live on Matchell. I live in Toronto, 2863 Dundas West. However, I grew up in King City. I'm a graduate of the Country Day School. I have many friends. I have family on Matchell. My sister lives across the park. Everything that's said here, I believe, is very valid. The one thing that we're missing, though, is the subject of community itself. So it says right here, it says, strengthen the fabric of our community. I used to work in the condo business, kind of, sort of. I also work in the arts in Toronto. I've been inside almost every single condo building in Toronto. I've spoken to many condo developers. It is no mistake that condos kill communities. There's no communal space in this development. There's a park across the street. My sister and her children go there daily. This is not about our community. This is about the most amount of money for the smallest space of land. So I heavily consider you to rethink this, perhaps build it in a field, perhaps build an art center, but please think about the community at large. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other speakers for the first time?
Mr. Mayor, members of council, staff, and residents. My name's Carmine Pirelli. I'm the owner of 36 Macho Avenue, the 6-story apartment building, right across from this proposal. A lot of the concerns that were brought up this evening are pretty valid. The one thing I want council to be aware of is that the road on Macho is very narrow, but from the curb to the property line, there's no boulevard space between the curb and the sidewalk. The sidewalk is right at the edge of the curb. Here's one of the challenges. One of the gentlemen mentioned that because of the elevation of the road, they have no parking in their driveways. They don't have driveways, so they have to park on the road, and I understand that. And that still has to remain if they're going to live there, because then they won't have anywhere to park. The problem we've been facing over the years that no one's brought up is that when the plow goes down the road, plows the snow back, it goes onto the sidewalk. And the sidewalk plow comes down, pushes it back onto the road. And this is a fact. And this is something that staff and council is going to have to deal with. So add to that the fact that the road is already narrow. Now you add the little bit of snow that falls off onto the road. The only way this proposal is going to work in this location is if there's no parking on Macho at all. It's the only way it's going to work, because there's no way to widen the road. You'd have to take down the houses. And unless the town is prepared daily when it snows to bring vehicles in, and that'll cause a disaster on the street with big trucks and trying to load the snow into the dump trucks. So if you take the parking off of Macho, where are these nice people going to park their vehicles? And the reality is, and I think we all know this, is that there's 100 and some odd parking spaces, 1.2. The reality is, in my family, I have 6 cars. So, some people, I think even 1.8 is a little bit low on the estimate pool. And reality is they're going to need somewhere to park, and Macho is going to be the brunt of that parking problem. This council has a serious issue to consider, because once the developers built their project, they're gone. We're going to have to deal with that traffic, the parking, the safety, the snow removal. And more importantly, where these people who have been parking, I understand they have a temporary parking permit to exempt during the winter months or something like that, but it's temporary. We have to find a permanent solution for these people. Otherwise, this plan just doesn't fit in with the community. Those are my comments. Thank you. If I could just get one of those.
Thank you, sir. Any other speakers for the first time, please, on this particular application? Sir, would you care to finish your presentation?
I'd love to. Thank you. Yeah, so we've touched on the parking. Now, my understanding is that if this is considered promenade area, I think the parking requirements are actually 1.5 to 2 spaces per residential unit. Again, I've highlighted the paragraph that I think is applicable for that, so that might need to be considered. Even with these parking factors, as people have mentioned, special events, occasions, holidays, all that kind of stuff is going to force overflow parking onto Matchell. All the traffic for the development will flow through Matchell. That's already been covered. Winter snow removal is also going to be an issue. That's already been covered. I won't bother you with the history. I've already stated that the road level's been changed a number of times, A, to accommodate the commercial interests of the property, There's been a long-standing agreement with the existing commercial property owners that some parking, even though it's private property, was being allowed for the residents of Matchell, and that accommodation's been there for over 30 years. That didn't change until about a year and a half ago. This is why Matchell Avenue was never a major parking issue, because there was always an accommodation being made. This is an example of how extreme the road level rise has been. These properties used to be at road level before the commercial property was developed. The road level was essentially raised to keep the delivery vehicles from bottoming out when they went up their driveway, because they were using Matchell as a kind of a rear entrance for making commercial deliveries. There's a longtime resident of the street who's lived there for over 50 years who can attest to the history of the development and the changes to the road level that have been made. Another interesting point is regarding the apartment building. The outside parking for that apartment building is actually has been installed on a floodplain. So every time there's rain in the forecast, this is the picture of what the road looks like. From one end to the other of Matchell, cars are parked. A lot of times they're parked right in front of my house when I come home with my groceries, and I have to walk. And before that was not an issue because I was able to park at the bottom end of the Liquidation World parking lot. This is not atypical. You can see that skies are clear, but there's a forecast of rain. So this is what happens on a regular basis. There's another commercial property at the end who has delivery so this is looking south on Matchell onto where it enters into Wellington. There's a picture of a delivery truck. There's usually about 2 or 3 or 4 every morning. They block part of the intersection. People making a right-hand turn going onto Matchell are forced to avoid colliding with cars who are trying to get out onto Wellington from the southbound. This is made even worse because a lot of the traffic from Yonge Street is dumping through Irwin to avoid the traffic lights at Yonge and Wellington. So there's an increased traffic flow already that already exists. So I'm not against development. I'm all for development. This property does, it has potential, and as I stated earlier, there's a lot of opportunity here, and I just don't think that this proposal is utilizing all the opportunities that are present. So in summation, I'd just like to say that, consideration needs to be given to the past planning oversights around the parking on a floodplain and the raising of the street levels to negate the possibility of parking for some residents. The proposed density is just simply too high. Mixed residential commercial with access to Yonge Street from the property would be more appropriate for the historical land use and the promenade concept for the Yonge-Wellington corridor. Reducing the density also allows for more parking to accommodate increased car density for the property because the planned parking there is just not going to be sufficient. Access to the property from Yonge Street to reduce the traffic and the snow clearing burden to Matchell, and to open up a pedestrian path for the Yonge-Matchell corridor. Creating a permanent parking solution such as grandfathering parking spaces for some of the properties that cannot put in driveways to be incorporated into the development plan and compensation for the historical accommodations made to accommodate the commercial.
Mr. Utes, once more, I'm going to ask you to...
Okay. And I'm curious about, so part of the planning process is to perform traffic studies and a light study, because one of the other concerns is this is a 45-foot tall building parked right in front of my house. It's going to block the light. So are there studies and things that are going to address those?
Okay, sir, let me get the developer up and we'll answer some questions. Thanks. Thank you. Ma'am, is this your first or, Ms. McIntyre, I'm going to wait. I'm going to ask the proponent to answer some of the questions, if I may, and then we'll go back. Ms. McIntyre. I've heard traffic, parking density, density of development, lighting,
we have our traffic consultants here.
environmental issues, that kind of thing.
Okay. I'm sorry. Can I proceed?
However you would like to answer some of
Okay,
those questions, then I'll go to Mr. Ramuno.
We have been listening to the concerns. We have our traffic consultant here. We have prepared a study in support of the application, and he will be available to answer questions. As far as the parking, the official plan only permits a maximum of 1.2 spaces per unit. That's the maximum. So we are right in the middle of the range, 1.17 spaces per unit. The minimum is 1. I'm not sure if you would like to address the traffic. I think that's the primary concern.
No, there's the density of the development, lighting concerns.
There has been no shadow study. Usually there's an angular plane that's enforced, and you're in the promenade design guidelines, and we will have to take a closer look at that, but I believe that we are conforming with the requirements. And so a shadow study could be done, I suppose, if necessary.
There was
density.
The clerk was very kindly taking some notes for me here.
Yes, I don't believe we are exceeding the density. I don't think there's actually, should defer to Drew, but I believe it's through the building height and floor space.
Okay, I can go to Mr. Ramuno on the density issue. With respect to, there was some concerns around Tannery Creek, access for emergency vehicles. You've talked a bit about the parking, just a sec. There was some concerns expressed about lack of commercial frontage, and I would phrase it just as conformity with the neighborhood and the promenade plan.
Okay, so parking we've covered. Tannery Creek, we have done a stormwater management study, and there is no drainage from the site to the creek. The site currently is primarily asphalt, and I believe there'll probably be more permeable surfaces after the development than there is currently. Well, there was when there was a parking lot there. I'm not sure what's there now. As far as commercial uses, they haven't worked there in the past. The official plan is asking for it. That's what our amendment is to remove the need for commercial uses. It's a failed commercial site. It's never worked really well. And most of your shopping in Aurora is done on Bayview Avenue. You've got, and Wellington over in the east side of town. So the type of commercial that's in this area, there's a limited amount that will be sustainable based on your population, and the population in the area is not going to significantly increase.
Okay, would you care to have does your traffic consultant wish to say anything?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. My name is Richard Pernicki. I am a traffic engineer with my company's Next Trans Engineering. We were retained by Carpino Developments, Cara Treasure Hill, to undertake a traffic impact study for the subject development proposal. We have filed that report with the application. We have received comments back from city staff or town staff. We have a few revisions to make to our report. However, I would like to point out that there are no real showstoppers in terms of our findings and conclusions. One of the things I would like to point out through way of our study was the significant amount of traffic that is actually infiltrating through this neighborhood, particularly in the AM and PM peak hours. And this traffic is traveling southbound on Yonge Street, making a right on Irwin, cutting through Matchell, and then heading west on Wellington. As you may be aware, there is a turn restriction currently in the AM peak period that is being disobeyed significantly. One additional item that is of great importance to that element is the fact that the town, in conjunction with the Region of York, is intending to add a southbound right turn lane at the intersection of Yonge Street and Wellington. And that's actually identified in Mr. Jamal Masada's traffic comments to myself. And I'll read it verbatim. The town intends to add a southbound right turn lane from Yonge Street onto Wellington Street in the future. The proposed widening is attached. What that will, in effect, do is essentially eliminate that cut-through traffic. Because right now, and I'm an Aurora resident as well for a number of years, is people wanting to go westbound on Wellington have to wait in a queue to make that right. With the right turn, southbound right turn lane, they can now flow freely through the intersection. Therefore, they won't be able to make that, or won't be required to make that cut through traffic. That is a significant improvement. Another thing I would like to mention, under the as of right zoning, a commercial development of this nature or on this size of lot would essentially generate, in my opinion, significant amount more traffic than the subject proposal. A commercial shopping center, be it anchored by a food store, generates hundreds of trips in the peak hour and upwards of 500 to 600 trips in a 24-hour peak period. I would like to point out these 126 dwelling units will generate approximately 60 trips in a peak hour. So it's about 1/10 of the amount of traffic that could be generated under as-of-right zoning. I have heard comments about parking. And I hear this every time I present in these council chambers. There's always two concerns: too much traffic, not enough parking. Unfortunately, with one, you get the other. If you provide more parking, you will provide more traffic or result in more traffic. Definitely, a gentleman mentioned he owns 6 cars. This type of development would not attract a 6-car owner type person. This is intended for empty nesters, first-time home buyers, single-car occupants. The 17 visitor parking spaces that are proposed are, in my opinion, more than sufficient to meet peak demands. That works out to a rate of around 0.15 spaces per unit. Typical standards I'm seeing nowadays in municipalities on urban corridors ranges from about 0.1 to 0.15. So in my opinion, we're on the high range of visitor. I think that addresses most of the comments. If there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Okay, we'll come back. Mr. Ramuno, do you have any comments? Density? Perhaps you could tell us a bit about what the promenade plan originally, thank you, sir, originally proposed for this area, how this differs, if it differs, and the overall inference. And there's a couple more questions I'd like to go to you for.
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a bit of background with respect to the existing permission within this part of town. As we've heard, it's designated as what we refer to our Promenade Secondary Plan, which was adopted and approved by council back in 2010. And it was really the vision for the area was to identify the Yonge Street corridor and Wellington Street corridor as our future intensification area, to permit mixed-use development, residential, office, commercial. But prior to that, the existing zoning for the majority of the property up and down Yonge Street already has what we refer to as a commercial/2 zone that currently exists on this property. That permits already a range of uses. It already permits apartment buildings up to 5 stories with commercial. So our promenade plan really just codified what we wanted to see for this area. Was a redevelopment of our downtown to get more people who are living downtown and create that critical mass, because as we've heard, Yonge Street is a corridor, a transit corridor, a main thoroughfare through town. So although we are dealing with amendments to our official plan and zoning bylaw, in my opinion, they're not in reality significant amendments, because the pre-existing zoning already permits this similar type of development. In fact, even more development, even more intense development up to 5 stories. With respect to the traffic, I appreciate the concerns, and we do hear those concerns on a regular basis. And as we've heard from the traffic engineer, no question that traffic through town, or the majority of the Toronto area is only increasing, but we need to balance that also with the goals of more intensification along these type of corridors. Parking, what we heard, the existing parking rate for this area of town is a minimum of 1 parking space per new residential unit and a maximum of 1.2. So what they are proposing is in keeping with the parking supply identified in their official plan, and we went through an extensive study back in 2010 to develop that new plan as well as establish new parking rates for that part of downtown. I know there are a bunch of other questions, Mr.
Well,
Mayor.
and one of the points that wasn't addressed, and this might be better from the proponent than you, Mr. Ramuno, is that the 3 properties, and I believe the owner of those properties did come up and express a concern with respect to ensuring that there was no trespass on his property, but also whether or not this proponent has had any conversation with respect to those 3 properties.
Certainly, through you, Mr. Mayor. Those 3 properties, my understanding is a single owner of the collision auto repair site, and there's the further north, the vacant lot that's immediately south of Irwin. I've had some discussions in the past with the owner. My understanding is, and as soon as the applicant had come in with this proposal, the Treasure Hill, they were advised to contact the owner. My understanding is that there's interest in those 3 parcels as well for future redevelopment. And so the first thing we do is ensure that any proponent in town, does speak to their immediate neighbors with respect to any coordination that may be required for future redevelopment. With respect to their concern regarding the retaining wall and access from one site to another, I mean, that's obviously, it exists today, but there's an easy solution there as part of any redevelopment. This is a proposed condominium development. There will be the requirements either by the applicant or by town staff for fencing to ensure security between those properties in that instance if it's warranted.
Thank you, Mr. Ramuno. Ms. McIntyre, have you any other comments at this time, or otherwise I'll go back to the public? Yep. I was actually talking to the other Ms. McIntyre, but that's okay. You come up. That's okay. Gail McIntyre. Oh, careful. And we also need you, the rules and regulations. We're nothing without rules.
Mr. Mayor, Council, staff, I just remembered that Aurora used to be called Machel's Corners before it became Aurora. So again, this is a historical note that I think we are nothing without remembering our history and knowing it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers, please? Second time. Or second half.
I'll use up everybody else's time. Mike Yu, it's 22 Matchell. Just a couple of comments on what was just spoken about. The comment about the commercial, the amount of traffic flow and for commercial versus residential. Something I like to point out is the commercial traffic, the advantage of it is that it's spread out through the day and it doesn't show up on the weekend when there's a holiday or whatever and increase these sort of peak events. The right turn comment on about turning onto from Yonge to Wellington, that right turn lane is, yeah, that'll be wonderful, but I'm just not sure when is that supposed to happen and what's happening to the properties that are already there. The Bank of Montreal building, like as far as I know, it's still there. So I'm not aware of any plans that's going to disappear. So in other words, that right-hand turn lane may not show up for a very long time. And on the parking designation, I have a copy of what I'm assuming is the applicable parking density. I can leave this with you people and you can look at it to see if I'm interpreting wrong, but it says the following parking requirement standards shall apply within the promenade general area and a promenade focus area designation. Is this not what we're talking about? No?
I'm sorry,
the area in question now, is it considered to be the promenade general area or the promenade focus area designation?
It's the promenade upper downtown area, sir, which is somewhat of a contradiction in terms, in my opinion, but that's neither here nor there.
Okay, because I'm looking at this and I'm seeing it's 1.5 to 2 spaces per unit. So, I can leave this with you to review and
Thank you.
Leave it with Linda. Thank you, sir. Any other comments on this, from the public, please?
Margaret Ferry at 35 Machel. I'd just like to clarify with this, Ms. McIntyre, that the reason that the commercial doesn't make it through is because when their leases come due at the end of, I don't care, 5 years, 10 years, 25 years, the owner has managed to put the rent of the grocery stores so high that Sobeys decided to go out to Bayview, leaving us old folks, who the heck cares? There's only a handful of us. So there's new subdivisions out that way, we'll put our store that way, and the rent won't cost us as much as it does at the corner of Yonge and Wellington. And I'm just wondering if we're going to have another turn lane there, who's going to expropriate what property? Because we don't have any choice on expropriation either, to make a turn, another turn. It's my understanding that someone just said that we're going to make another turn to go
the right turn, you're talking about a right turn lane?
Right.
Okay.
So, and what property are we expropriating to get that right-hand turn?
Okay.
Just a question.
Yeah, fair comment. Thank you.
Hello again. Hugh Walker, 24 Matchell Avenue. I just want to respond to a couple of questions. I heard some interesting terms. Empty nester and first-time home buyers were uttered with regard to this property. I found that rather amusing, considering that the upper condominium is stair access only, I believe. I haven't seen any pictures of elevators, so these empty nesters must be pretty agile. And first-time home buyers. I usually associate first-time home buyers with mothers with prams, so they'll be wheeling prams up and down stairs, but it's just a minor comment. The other thing was, again, I would respond with what Margie was saying there about the density of the existing commercial on Yonge Street. As part of the revitalization plan was to try and basically draw more people to the downtown area. And if I may use as an example, the city of Toronto, where I lived many, many years ago, Queen Street west of Spadina was, apologies to the citizens of Toronto, a slum. However, it had an advantage over portions of Yonge Street. It was the pavements were wider, so cafes started, boulevard setups on the cafes. This brought the artists, this brought the poets. They enjoyed the tranquility of this place. The fact that they were there brought more upscale shops. The fact that there were more upscale shops brought more upscale buyers. That's how you would evolve a revitalization plan. And I don't think this project certainly doesn't do that. And with all due respect to our CIP plan from 2010, 5 years ago, we haven't started doing it yet anywhere on Yonge Street. Thank you again very much.
Thank you, sir. Any other speakers from the public on this particular application? And I will remind you that no decision is being taken this evening. If there's no other speakers from the public on this particular application, I will close the public portion of this meeting. I will go to council, ask councillors if they have any comments or questions for the proponent, and then we'll get into the report. I've got Councillor Gartner first, Councillor Baracus, Thompson, Puri, Tom, Abel.
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to wait. Thank you.
Councillor Baracus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the proponent. I saw the comment on the slide that this plan fits within the provincial policy statement and also within the region's plan. I guess my question to the proponent is how is this a benefit to our plan and our community? And I'm just wondering if you can give me an answer, because I didn't see that as part of any of the presentation.
It conforms with your plan as far as built form, massing, bringing intensification to the downtown, bringing more residents in, bringing more vitality in. The region deemed it was not, it was of local interest, and it conformed with all their policies and objectives, most of which are embodied in your official plan. You have to implement their their goals and objectives.
Thank you. And just another question through you, Mr. Chair, to the proponent. I'm also just curious if, when there is construction, if there is in the foreseeable future, where, I mean, there's issues with parking and with traffic. I'm just wondering where all the construction vehicles would be parking, because I know that during construction there is a lot of trucks that would be coming through. A lot of vehicles need to be parked somewhere, and I'm just wondering where they would be situated considering the traffic and parking issues.
I would imagine on site, and it would somehow be phased, but that's a little beyond my scope as a planner to deal with the actual construction logistics. But there usually is a plan required as part of engineering submissions.
Okay, thank you. And then, so I guess this is more for the public. I was just curious to whether if they would, maybe I can get a nod if there was any issues during the demolition with vehicles.
I'm sorry?
There was, during the demolition, the current demolition, if there was any issues with vehicles of the demolition crew parking on the street sides. I guess there was, so. Okay, thank you. That's all.
Thank you.
For now.
Councillor Gartner?
No, Mr. Mayor, I'm really going to wait. I don't want to speak at the moment.
Councillor Thompson?
My questions are more for staff. So.
Okay. Councillor Peary?
So I guess my first point would be, in my opinion, the claims that commercial wouldn't work on site. I don't agree with them at all. Now, I understand that if you were to put it on site, it would probably only be in blocks 5 and 6. And to do so, you would have to drastically alter the parking. You'd have to have people driving in. And so I do understand why you're not proposing the commercial. But to say the commercial wouldn't work, it's not something that I agree with myself. You couldn't tell me that a Pusateri's or another smaller format grocery store wouldn't do really well in there. That's my opinion. It's different than yours, and that's okay. And I do understand and recognize that you guys could be building something much larger and much denser. And so I guess I'm sort of grateful that you're not recommending that at this point in time, because you could have a much larger central building on site. And I get that, and again, I appreciate the fact that you're coming in with something a little bit smaller. I guess my issues with what's being presented, blocks 5 and 6, if they could, on Yonge Street, represent more of a historical facade, something that matches in with what is south of Wellington, I think it could be done. I think, you know, the aesthetics of the building, in my opinion, are great. I would still just want to see something more historical in nature abutting Yonge Street. And with regards to traffic and parking, I think that's likely the largest hurdle to overcome. In my mind, though, there's a really easy solution. And if we were to allow one-way traffic onto Matchell, one way out of that area on Irwin, it would allow plenty of parking for the current residents who are forced on street anyways to park through a permit on site. It would direct people more than probably they'd like to be directed, and force them to turn right onto Yonge Street, to turn right into Matchell. But from an overall working perspective, I think that would rectify a lot of the issues and a lot of the problems that are currently being proposed. But I don't think that's something you guys can fix.
I agree.
So there's that element. I guess that'll be one of my questions. Recognizing the site limitations, I think there's always room for improvement on any plan. I personally would have loved to have seen some commercial. I think it could have worked really, really well. But I do understand why you're not proposing it and you're going through the official plan process. So if we can do something in future to come back with a little bit more of a historical looking facade, it would be greatly appreciated.
Councillor Tom.
Thank you, Mayor Daw. Ms. McIntyre, I guess my first question is, you mentioned that one of the reasons you're asking for the the zoning bylaw amendment is because commercial is not viable in this area. You mentioned that it's a fringe area for commercial, that it represents a failed commercial area, and you guys don't believe it's viable. That's the main reason you're asking for the amendment. Is that not correct?
That is one of the reasons, yes.
One of the reasons? The main reason?
Probably, yes.
So it's on my understanding that the whole point of the promenade study is to revitalize the downtown core of Aurora and bring a vibrant mixed use of commercial and residential as part of that revitalization. All the vibrant neighborhoods, as a gentleman just mentioned, in the city, in any city you go to, have a mix of commercial, residential, especially on the main thoroughfares. Yonge Street is the main thoroughfare of our town. It is our main street. Not too many towns can boast that their main street is Yonge Street. And it's still in its historic form, which Aurora's is. So I question that. I don't think it's a failed commercial area. I think to this point in time it's been failed, but that's the whole point of the promenade, to revitalize the area. So you don't revitalize an area by changing the use, in my opinion. So I don't agree. That's more of a comment. I do have another question though. So in terms of the design that you've put forward, what architectural style is that? Do we have
I guess it would be the, I'm not an architect, but the mid-century modern trend that a lot of housing and
I'm wondering
buildings
which century, maybe 20 something, but because a lady did touch on it, I believe that the other Mrs. McIntyre in the crowd, that this community used to be called Machel's Corners, and the corner they're talking about is Yonge and Wellington Street. It's the oldest part of our town. One gentleman mentioned it looked like a prison. I don't think it looked like a prison, but I think it reminded me a lot of my dorm room in university. So I have problems, as Councillor Peary said, with the architectural style as well. So I don't know if you have any comments on how you came up with that style. It doesn't seem to fit in with the heritage nature of the area, in my opinion. But I'd like to hear what you have to say about that.
Can I answer your question or
Sure.
comment about the commercial uses along Yonge Street?
You may answer
because I lived at the corner of Yonge and Lawrence in Toronto for a number of years, and I love shopping. And my activity every Saturday would be to walk up and down Yonge Street, down to Eglinton, back up to York Mills. And all through that strip, you get a transition of uses. There's areas that have more residential, there's areas that have more service commercial, and then there's the areas that you want to go that have, the stores that you want to shop in and the restaurants. But there is a mix of uses such as that all along Yonge Street, and they do work together. And what I've noticed over the past is where you get to the sort of areas where you get big open space areas or areas that aren't so interesting for pedestrians, like for instance you have a church site on one side and a park, the commercial dies off. And so it's better to keep it contained. You have more of a destination, and that sort of commercial is kind of iffy anyway. So at the current time, I can't see anybody who would want to walk up there to go shopping, even if there were stores on that site.
For sure, I just don't think that there is any options there. So why would you walk if there is no shop? So, I mean, Toronto might be a bad example because the area we're talking about, the historic downtown of Aurora, is a few kilometers. Not very long, or you can walk it in 10 minutes. So this is right on that area. And so, anyhow, we have a disagreement on that. That's fine. I just want to get more of a sense of why you think the commercial would fail, and I don't agree, as Councillor Peary didn't agree. And on the design?
I'm not the architect. It's a popular style that's out there now. You can drive around and see when plazas and buildings were built based on their styles and influences that the architects used.
For sure. I guess we're just trying to promote, we're just trying to protect the heritage small town feel of our town, and that's where we come from. So anyhow, and then the last question I have is, has Treasure Hill done any mixed use development in the past, commercial and residential?
I would have to defer to my client. I know they've done medium density. I know they've done commercial. I'm not sure what they've done that's mixed. Could I defer to, yes, could Joran Wiener come up?
Hi there, my name's Joran Wiener. I'm with Treasure Hill. I could probably answer some of those questions. But in terms of mixed use, we've looked at it many times. First of all, I mean, when we talk about mixed use, I'm also a planner background, by the way, but when we talk about mixed use, we don't necessarily always describe mixed use in terms of one building or one site. We talk about mixes of uses in areas, and I think in this particular area, you do have some retail, but you also need people to feed that retail, and that's where when we talk about mixes of uses, we want to bring, or at least I would think that the community will want to bring more people to help support the retail that is there, and there is a large vacancy in that area. In terms of mixed use in one building, no, we have not. We've looked at it. We've found a lot of challenges with it. When you're incorporating mixed use, you have to accommodate two different types of parking. You have to do residential parking as well as parking for transient consumers. You have to make sure there's enough there. You have to accommodate for loading, which is a big challenge. And then if you try to accommodate restaurants, you have to accommodate venting, and residential and restaurant uses actually don't work very well. Despite there being a lot of it pushed in say, downtown areas like Toronto, you'll notice that there's a lot of separation between those two uses, and they have to be thought of very, very carefully, and they don't mix very well. In terms of, you'd asked about the architectural styling. So we've done several projects actually throughout the GTA. We actually won an award in a heritage district where we did a heritage-inspired type of building, but it was picking up on its exact neighbors. In this particular case, we don't have houses that are right next to each other, and we actually, I'm dealing with it with several heritage sites, and all of the heritage architects that I've dealt with have also said that when you try and recreate a facade, for example, of old heritage, it looks like Disneyland. And they're actually very against that. So what we try and do is we try and bring in contemporary architecture. So what it does is it does highlight the existing heritage buildings that are there. And Joan is right, this is a very popular style. It is a contemporary style, but it does pick up on a lot of cues that have been with us for centuries. For example, we use a mix of brick and stone, and that's sort of how we ended up coming to this style. We wanted something that again, it was head-turning, but also makes you turn your head when you actually look at the existing heritage structures there. So I hope that answers your question. So now that I'm up here, I can field any others that you might have.
I've got Councillor Abel.
Thank you. And thank you very much for coming forward with your application. We welcome the intensification on Yonge, and you're one of the ones that are doing it. We see Centro just north of you. I think it's important that we provide the type of intensification you have. My question is, and the comment was about greenery. Can you enlighten us what sort of planting and landscaping and that you see, because it's not really shown in here. I can see it a bit in your proposed rendering for Yonge. It looks like you're planting a lot of trees on the top. So I think the word is canopy that we use, and it's going to be difficult with your heights, but what do you have in mind there?
Is it possible to get the slide? There was a slide with the site plan that showed, I don't know how to use this. Okay, there's the site plan. So I understand that you're looking at a lot of roofs. So we are proposing a rooftop amenity as well. But in front of the units, there's some fairly generous landscaping where we have to conform with all of the town's policies with regards to landscaping as well. So the private road is actually going to be landscaped on both sides. So you'll have trees, and if you look between blocks, we got 1, 2, 3, and 4. There's actually a pedestrian corridor through those 2 blocks as well, where we have trees and shrubs through the planting plan there. They all have to meet a particular soil volume as well to ensure that they're going to grow and be viable. And we're also on Yonge Street. Now we've rendered the site, but on this plan here you can see that there's trees at every unit. So we're trying to create sort of an urban street front along Yonge Street, which is what I thought something that the community would actually appreciate and benefit from.
Did you Did you cut down that oak tree at the north end of your property?
I've been told that I have. I actually haven't been by the site in about a week or so, so I'm not sure which one is being referred to. So,
I know it well.
I believe, Councillor, that was previous owners, not these owners.
When was this? Yeah, when was this cut down? Apparently,
3 years ago.
Yeah, we didn't own the site at that point in time.
Thank you very much for that clarification.
Excuse me, can I just clarify one other thing about the lease? There was a comment made about a lease expiring, and I just wanted to clarify that Liquidation World that was there, they were actually purchased by an American firm called Big Lots, and they actually left Canada, and they vacated the site. That we did not terminate.
Excuse me, please.
No, sorry. Big Lots purchased Liquidation
Mr.
World.
Weiner?
Yes.
Through the chair, please.
Oh, sorry. Through you, Mr. Chair. So we just wanted to clarify that there was no lease expiry. Our tenant actually left. We had intentions of keeping a tenant there long term. They left, and we actively tried to market the site and try and get some retail uses, and we were getting absolutely no bites.
I understand that having grown up there, I loved a shopping center in that location. I think the first one was IGA, then it went to, there was one in between. I thought it was Metro, and then it went to Sobeys, and then went to Price Chopper. But when I used to go there with my kids, after we pulled in, and we would go, are we going to the IGA, Metro, Sobeys, Price Chopper? Because we saw that it was always being turned over. And that means one very clear thing, that not enough people went there for it to run its business. And you can't force someone to go there and run a business and take a loss. That's not sustainable. And I think that established very clearly that there was a problem with that, even with all that parking. I do want to say, if I can, I am one of the people that cuts down Irwin when I'm coming south, because I look at the left turn lane, especially in the evening, because there is no advance. And if I see a couple of buses, I know no one's moving. So I cut down Irwin. I used to cut through the Price Chopper, Sobeys, Metro, IGA, and onto Machel, but that you blocked that off, so I don't do that anymore. Even with the speed bumps, I would do that. Anyways, my next question, pardon me?
Can you have a point from Mr. Weiner?
Thank you very much. Water, draining off. So is the water going to be captured on the rooftops and on the streets? Where is that draining?
So the engineer has to do a stormwater management report, and they have to capture, they have to meet all of the town's requirements for capturing the water. It will be captured it'll be held on site and then slow released through the storm sewer system, but it will be all designed to city standards. So there will be no additional flows to any of the creeks. In fact, they probably will be reduced, given that right now the entire site is impervious, and so water just runs off the site as it was prior to the demolition.
You would imagine it would be an improvement because you will be slow releasing rather than it just flying off. Okay, and I appreciate that, because the odd time in heavy storms we see flooding right there at that corner. Can I ask another question, Mr. Mayor? Thank you. Snow removal. So is the snow going to be contained? You're not pushing snow out onto Machel. I see some private contractors do that.
It will not be pushed onto Machel, that is correct.
Okay.
So it will be privately collected onto a truck and then hauled off-site, not onto Machel.
Is that, you proposed it, would you consider a snow melter?
We would consider it. I don't know if it would be feasible. I don't know if it would be feasible. I'd have to consider it and take a look.
Thank you.
Councillor Gardner. Yeah.
Thank you. Are you planning to put any permeable pavement here? Or is it just going to be the little areas here that have the trees?
The permeable pavers, we'll have to look at that through the stormwater management report. We have not considered that at this point. I'd have to take a more detailed look at the landscape plan. I believe, actually, we may have specified it on some of the visitor parking areas. I'd have to take a look at that.
Thank you. With respect to the snow removal, is that going to be done in the early hours of the morning when people are sleeping?
I would have to, we haven't engaged a contractor at this point in time. We can certainly raise that concern with the contractor if there's a concern in terms of when it's
Because we need to
removed.
worry about these residents and our future residents. And also, is there any amenity space in this building, these buildings?
Each suite has its own outdoor amenity space, yes.
No.
So
No, each suite has like a balcony? Or
the upper suites all have a rooftop terrace. So it's not a common corridor type of building. I don't know if we can go to the slide showing the cross section.
So it's not required to have a common amenity space?
That is correct.
Okay. That's all for now, thanks.
Councillor Maracas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the proponent. It's my understanding that this is going to be a wood frame build?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, and would that be part of the challenge of having commercial? With having commercial, could you do commercial within a wood frame structure?
You could. It does pose additional and different types of challenges, but yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Are there, through you, Mr. Mayor, are there elevators in these buildings?
No, there are not.
Thank you.
If there's no more comments for the proponent, I will close this portion of the meeting and we'll get the report put on the floor. Councillor Gartner, what are you doing? Oh, okay, thank you. We'll close the public portion of the meeting. We'll put the report on the floor. Councillor Gartner, are you moving the report as it is at this point?
No, Mr. Mayor, I'm moving option 2, that this come back to another public planning meeting.
Is there a second? Councillor Maracas, comments or questions to the report, please? Councillor Thompson, Councillor Perry.
Thank you. Through to Mr. Bruno. Mr. Bruno, earlier you talked about the fact that it does need an official plan amendment, and in your view, you didn't feel that it was a significant amendment, specifically with not requiring retail. But we have a promenade urban design strategy. It's certainly a special design area, as referenced earlier. It says it's an upper downtown. But when I look at this specific area, this corner, and all that's referenced in the design objectives, the design guidelines, it fails to conform with most of the suggestions. You know, within the design guidelines, it actually says that retail uses are required. Well, obviously, they're looking to weigh that. It specifically references the Price Chopper site, talks about the need for publicly accessible open spaces, both for the development but also for the surrounding area. It speaks to parking issues, mid-block concentrations, and goes on to talk about how this area, the Yonge Wellington intersection, is both historically and symbolically significant, and talks about Matchell Avenue frontage and so forth. And so I have a challenge in the sense that I do feel that it is a significant amendment to our official plan to allow the proposal as it stands. You know, to me, it's a question of fit. I think that Treasure Hill have done some great developments within the community, you know, as they show on their slides earlier around Bayview and so forth. But, you know, in this case, you look at, as was stated by Councillor Tom, you know, we're trying to revitalize the downtown. We're looking at it from a 30,000 foot level, and we're trying to paint a picture, and we need these kind of components. I'm concerned that not adhering to that guidelines for the upper downtown area and parceling off a significant piece of it will prevent us from ever achieving those objectives. So I guess I'd like your comments with regards to not just the retail uses, but all of the other design guidelines that are within the promenade study that will not be able to accomplish as a result of this development. Mr. Muno, please.
Certainly, through you, Mr. Mayor. With respect to the retail component, I think Mr. Wiener touched on it. In my opinion, when we were developing the promenade plan back in 2009, I mean, the policy is clear. It talks about, you know, mixed-use development. But in my opinion, I think we've seen the history on this particular corner with respect to the large retail format. Hasn't been successful. I've dealt with a lot of developers and building communities, the building community who are looking towards unfortunately, the Bayview corridor as a larger commercial corridor. But I think what we really want to try and achieve within the downtown is, I think we need the critical mass of getting residents living downtown, and it wasn't necessarily the intent to replace the amount of commercial space that was there when the lands are redeveloped, specifically in these larger suburban type retail plaza formats. So I'm not as necessarily concerned with on a site-by-site basis where the retail commercial is not replaced, because I believe once we have that critical mass there are plenty of opportunities of existing retail, especially south of Wellington, in those 2 blocks south of Wellington, where we do have that sort of existing mixed-use component. With respect to the other design components, I mean, one of the things that we are going to look at, along with all the comments that we're hearing from the public and council, and that's a reason for the public meeting, and in completing our review of all the background work, the technical work, the traffic, stormwater management, from a design perspective, we will, and it has been sent to our control architect, who is the planning partnership, and they were involved in the preparing the promenade plan. So I think the initial comment we have from them, they're in agreement with the design and the build form and the massing of the development. We're waiting for their final comments, but obviously I've heard some comments here tonight about perhaps trying to improve the design with respect to the facades of those 2 blocks that front on the Yonge Street. So we'll definitely take those back and have a look in the discussion with our control architect and the proponent.
Sir.
And I appreciate the explanation. And I think that there are a number of good components of it. But again, it comes to me a question of fit. If this was in another part of Aurora, I don't think I would have as much issue as I do now. And I go to our own report, where on page 3 it says that careful regulation of land uses and control over the scale and character of new structures is required in order to enhance the pedestrian experience. And that's what I keep coming back to. I think that pedestrian experience, if we're going to revitalize the downtown core, if we're going to try and achieve those objectives that we set forth, we're asking everybody to comply and to adhere to those design guidelines that we put together for the promenade plan. And so, by allowing somebody to opt out of it, I'm worried about that precedent being set for future development, because we know there's going to be more and more infill applications along that Promenade Yonge Street corridor. And so I'd like to see us to adhere to those design guidelines as much as possible.
Councillor Perry.
Through you to Mr. Muno, should we be talking to Mr. Simonovskis' group with regards to one-way traffic? Because I do think it could solve the problem that I think I heard most readily from a majority of the residents. They're concerned about not being able to park in front of their homes. I think there has to be a provision that would allow for that. If they want to have any guests, when we're talking about snow clearing, if everybody's lined up on the same side of the street and there's only one way of traffic, if one of our trucks has to go through and clear it out, that makes sense to me as well. Can we get Mr. Simonovskis' comments on that, please?
Mr. Miller?
Certainly, through you, Mr. Mayor, I did make a point of that, and our traffic engineers are reviewing the traffic study, so I will have that discussion with them, have them explore that option of whether that's viable to look at a one-way condition along Irwin and Machel.
Because I would probably say that even if we were looking at a condo building with first floor commercial, that's still a major issue and a major hurdle that needs to be resolved in some capacity. So I think if we can address that problem and make the lives of the residents a little bit better, regardless of the actual building, I think it would be of benefit for us to look at that.
Councillor Abel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think there's some confusion on our promenade and the mixed use and the vision and the design. I hear the revitalization and I hear the pedestrian experience, and I get that. So If you have more people, then you'll have more pedestrians, and the pedestrian traffic would go to south of Wellington, in my opinion, and visit those stores there, and then walk into the cultural precinct that we're proposing. So this is exactly what you want to do if you want to create that cultural precinct. You want to shoulder it with some intensification. And we're better than right on Yonge Street because we're going to put down a corridor and walking distance to the GO station. I think really the biggest concern is how Machel has, you know, I drive down that road and it is a challenge, especially on the west side. And I don't understand how you can have a sidewalk and then step down to the person's house. And it's just the way it was built. I don't know how that history, I don't know how that got going, but I could see a plow coming down and throwing the snow onto the sidewalk and onto the other guys walking. I'm sure they have to clear that snow as well. Again, when the snowplow comes, it must be a real, you must just stand out there and watch them. And anyways, how that happened, I don't know, but that is a concern. It's narrow. Those houses, especially near Wellington, have a real issue there. Never thought about it before. One parking solution I could see and will evolve is over on the south part of Wellington where Aw Shucks is. That parking lot is owned by the town, much like we allow overnight parking permits in our town right here in the town hall. We could alleviate some of that there. We can't rebuild Machel and do what we would normally do with a sidewalk on a boulevard on level ground. That's too late for that. But there will be some impact. But that is impactful on Machel before this even goes in. Traffic, there must have been a lot of traffic in the IGA days with that parking lot, and that was alluded to by the traffic consultant. Not peak periods during rush hour, but there was a lot of traffic going in and out when those stores were quite busy. I think we should. There are minor flaws in a promenade plat. Just to blanket and say everyone has to be mixed use. Why couldn't you have a lot of commercial and then a heavily dense area? I can see it's been established that that commercial spot hasn't worked. It hasn't worked for decades. So let's get some intensification there. If you ask some of the retailers, if we could bring busloads of people and drop them on Yonge Street and have them walk, would that be a good thing? Of course it would be. That would improve their traffic. So I think some of the neighboring retails would favor not having to compete with another mixed commercial unit. And those units, if you look at Centro and you look at some of the other ones north of Aurora Heights and across, I don't want to say, but there's not big businesses. There's a bridal shop. I think everyone has a nail salon. There's not a lot going on there. So I don't mind exempting them, but I think we should clarify what our vision is, because if you look at the whole Yonge Street, and it was brought up, I lived on Yonge Street between Lawrence and York Mills. I know it well. I had a restaurant at Yonge and Eglinton. You do get spots around Lawrence and York Mills where they don't have the mixed use. They have intensification, and then that residents spill out. So I understand that. That makes sense to me. That's on Yonge Street. You know, Hogs Hollow was a very, and still is, a very significant heritage area, as is Machel Park, or Machel Corners, excuse me. So I get that. So I'm willing to listen. I think there's a great deal of merit to what they're proposing. We do need that intensification. We do need to get younger and single families, you know, young families and seniors, and provide that for them on Yonge Street. And so that's a lot of density in that area. I'm in favor of it, but I'm also concerned about the impact on Machel, because it's already impacted by, in my opinion, a poor design on that road, and this isn't going to help it. So I think we really have to address that. But one solution would be us providing some parking overnight at our south lot, and going forward. So I'm interested in seeing how that all comes out.
Councillor Marcus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I gotta say, it's been a year of public planning meetings, and I gotta say, this is probably the first time that an application that is asking for intensification is actually within the area that we've designed for intensification, or we've kind of visioned for intensification. So while I do appreciate that, I do feel that there are some concerns with the application. I do agree that it doesn't fall within our official plan, and there is, when it comes to that commercial component, I would like to see that there, and I think that vision that we have for the area speaks to it, and I don't think it's something that we should take lightly, and I think doing looking at application by application, kind of like piece by piece, is not the way we should do it, and we need to look at this as a whole, as an area, as the promenade study speaks to it. And I mean, when I look at the commercial aspect of it, I don't necessarily see, 5 or 6 thousand square foot units that would house nail salons or stuff like that. You could possibly have a mid-sized grocery store and bring that grocery store back to the area where you would have a lot of foot traffic. I believe a grocery store in that area would flourish quite well. So, I don't see a concern in that. That's what I would really like to see for, coming out of this and to be tweaked with. There is going to be intensification within the area, and I think we all have to realize that because it is what we have identified. So, but I think it's the right type of identification. Councillor Thompson mentioned that fit, and I think that's what it has to be. It has to fit within our vision, what we want for our community, and I think that's the most important thing. It's the architectural style. I agree with Councillor Tom and Councillor Perry. I'd like to see a little bit more of a heritage look to it, as it falls within that district of ours, and I think it's very key and important for us to keep that uniqueness of our town. We heard from the proponent that there really isn't that much of an architectural style or a heritage style within thing. Well, I just look across the street and I look at the McIntyre House. So, maybe you could use that as a style to frame the building. For me, when I look at it now, while it does look nice, it looks modern, to me it's cookie cutter. So it doesn't fit, once again, within the community. So those are the type of things I'd like to see. And as far as traffic concerns, there's a lot of issues when it comes to traffic at the Yonge and Wellington corridor. We all know it. We're all trying to work to come up with solutions for it. There's, from left-hand turn restrictions to, Mr. Mayor, to your pilot project we'll possibly be doing in the future, to adding in a right-hand turn lane. There's so many things that we as a council and region are looking at. Hopefully things happen sooner rather than later, but we do understand that there's challenges, and I think our infrastructure department, we get them involved and we look at it, and I think we can come up with a solution for that will work for everyone. So I'm looking forward to seeing what comes next at the next public planning meeting, and hopefully the proponent comes with something that fits within our community.
Other speakers, please. Councillor Tom.
Thank you, Mayor Daw. I won't speak for too much longer, but Councillor Abel touched on this. I think, at least for myself, I'm in support of redevelopment of this site. I'm in support of intensification. You've heard that from everyone. I like Councillor Abel, was excited when I heard that this was going to be redeveloped, because like him, I'd shopped there many times. It used to be a food city back in the day. And that was like way back in the days, a food city. There was an IGA and stuff. So it has turned over quite a lot, which shows you that those types of uses weren't successful, which we've seen. But when we talk about the mixed commercial residential, we're not talking about having a giant grocery store at Yonge and Wellington. We're talking about a different type of commercial use, which could be viable there. So yes, that type of commercial use wasn't viable, but that doesn't mean that other types of commercial uses aren't viable. Councillor Thompson brought up, and I think he's got a bit of a slideshow coming for us, so I'm going to maybe defer to him, but I'd like to see this plan. I think there's huge potential for this spot in our town. There is such huge potential for this location, and I'd like to see it conform, if it's not exactly, at least as close to as possible, the vision we have in the promenade study. And as long as we get more information on the traffic studies and all that kind of stuff, I know that in my short time on council, I haven't seen a study or a consultant that hasn't been in support of an application. So I'd like to see, just how we're going to make the traffic fit, the parking fit. And I really think, as Councillor Marakis just mentioned, that the heritage design, in my opinion, has to be a bit more in fitting with the nature of that downtown area. So those are my comments now. I am in support of redevelopment. I'm in support of intensification. I just think it has to be the right type of intensification and redevelopment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tom. Other speakers, please. Councillor Gardner. Councillor Thompson, second time, later.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've been waiting for a long time for the developer to come forward with a plan. I'm very glad to see them at the table. I have a question for you, Mr. Mayor and Mr. Bruno. We have comments from the public, but we don't have any comments from staff as we usually do in our reports. And I see that there's a lot of studies that have been submitted. Has staff been able to have a look at these studies and provide comments for council?
I don't think Mr.